There's been a number of signs that there's new tensions between the U.S. and China, including this Truth Social post just a few moments ago from the president, where he says that he believes he made a fast deal with China to try to save them from what he thought was going to be a very bad situation. He says the bad news is that China, perhaps not surprisingly to some, has totally violated its agreement with the U.S. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. So the clear suggestion there is that perhaps the trade de-escalation is done and we could see a re-escalation and maybe even higher tariffs. And this is not sitting well with the market. We saw U.S. stock futures move into reverse when this Truth Social post came out, and it does just sort of remind everyone, and you see Dow futures down about 120 points, not a massive loss, but a notable shift in direction. It does show that investors are still concerned, for good reason, about this trade war.
Yeah, we'll have to see if the president has the political will to up those tariffs.
Well, there you have it. Donald Trump is once again publicly lashing out and picking an unnecessary fight with the world's second biggest economy, renewing and exacerbating fears of a global trade war and sending the stock market reeling as a consequence. This is totally unnecessary. And I think much of it has to do with recent taunts made by Wall Street that got under Trump's skin, and he's reacting in the way that a child would rather than the most powerful man on earth. And we will all have to live with the consequences. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, let's take a look at Donald Trump's ridiculous, petulant Truth Social response. He says, 2 weeks ago, China was in grave economic danger. The very high tariffs I set made it virtually impossible for China to trade into the United States marketplace, which is by far #1 in the world. We went in effect cold turkey with China, and it was devastating for them. Many factories closed, and there was, to put it mildly, civil unrest. I saw what was happening, and I didn't like it. For them, not for us. I made a fast deal with China in order to save them from what I thought was going to be a very bad situation, and I didn't want that to happen. Because of this deal, everything quickly stabilized, and China got back to business as usual. Everybody was happy. That is the good news. The bad news is that China, perhaps not surprisingly to some, has totally violated its agreement with us. So much for being Mr. Nice Guy. Now, of course, he doesn't substantiate what it is exactly China did to piss him off today. It could be that, he just woke up on the wrong side of the bed and he's hearing the word taco, 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 a reminder about the significance of that particular phrase in just a moment. But it goes without saying that basically everything Trump said in that Truth Social response was just full of shit. China has other markets as well. I mean, certainly being closed out of the United States is devastating to them, but they have other markets as well, like Europe, that they can deal with as well. So it's not like they would go totally out of business, number one. Number two, this idea that China was only feeling the pain and not the United States is also not true. Trump's economic polling is in the toilet as a consequence. He's lashing out at companies who say that they're going to have to increase their costs, pass the cost of Trump's ridiculous tariffs onto the consumer, and he's panicking about that. There's a really bad situation here at home because of Trump's tariffs. Number three, the idea that not only is the pain one-sided, but Trump was motivated to try to bring this to a swift conclusion because he saw issues within China, internally within China, is again totally ridiculous. Anybody who pays attention to Donald Trump knows he's a sociopath who doesn't really give a damn about other countries. And number four, there was no deal. There was no deal. Trump lied his ass off about that too. There were meetings in, I believe, Switzerland or Sweden a few weeks ago, and Trump dropped the tariffs down substantially. He didn't totally shut them off, but he reduced the tariffs substantially. China reduced theirs against us while they discussed the prospects of a deal. That is not a deal. So again, Trump, major lies in that unhinged response. And of course, we see what's going on with the stock market. Stock market today, S&P 500 falls after Trump hits out at China. Court stays ruling voiding Trump's levies. Besson earlier said trade talks are a bit stalled. Stock indices slipped Friday after Trump accused China of violating its deal with the U.S., injecting fresh volatility in what has been a whirlwind month for investors. China's reluctance to approve exports of rare earth materials is one reason Trump said Beijing is violating the agreement, U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said. China is slow-rolling its compliance, particularly on the export licenses, according to Greer. The new tension casts a shadow on what has been a largely positive, if turbulent, period for U.S. stocks. As of early Friday, both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ Composite were on track for the biggest monthly gains of the year. Wow, a year of total turbulence, and you want to boast about the biggest monthly gains of the year that were only We're about to hit 6 months in. Again, the grading on a curve of even the conservative Wall Street Journal of Trump is absurd. Yesterday, a court stayed a ruling voiding Trump's sweeping levies. The administration could yet win its appeal, but it could also deploy alternative measures to institute or maintain tariffs. Specifically, the White House is considering a Trade Act provision that allows for levies up to 15% for 150 days. So, real quick there, said yesterday that the Trump administration the day before suffered its biggest legal defeat yet in that a federal trade court, which is comprised of 3 judges, 2 conservative, one appointed by President Reagan, one appointed by Donald Trump, and one appointed by President Obama. So there's one liberal of the 3. They unanimously said Trump's, invocation of IEPA, the IEEPA statute to, basically create these sweeping global tariffs, that it was unconstitutional. And they said immediately, most of these tariffs got to go. Okay. But then a higher court said, okay, well, while we're considering this, we're going to stay the injunction. So at least for the time being, while this makes its way through the appellate process, Trump's tariffs are back on schedule. So it's been a total whipsaw. Let's get back to it. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said late Thursday that the legal turmoil around tariffs hasn't had any impact on trade negotiations. He said a couple of very large deals were close, but that talks with China were a bit stalled. Okay, and we might actually cover that in a separate video, but he did tell Fox, yeah, they're kind of a bit stalled, which is strange because Trump's saying, oh, we have a deal and everything was going great. Once again, Scott Bessent unfortunately told on his boss here, and Trump contradicted himself because Trump's a liar. Despite May's uptick in markets, American consumers remained gloomy about the economy. The final reading for a closely watched sentiment index came in unchanged from April, although up from an historically low preliminary reading. So, right now, people are still really, really upset about the economy. People still think the economy is not doing well. They're blaming Trump for it more than President Biden. This is bad political news, not just for Trump, but arguably more importantly, the Republican Party that has become Trump's authoritarian cult of personality. Because if Trump, who is constitutionally ineligible for a second term, chooses to uphold the Constitution and leave quietly on January 20th, 2029, it will be the other Republicans around him who bear the political consequences of that. So we'll see what happens. I should also say, let's see, separate data indicated that the Federal Reserve's preferred inflation gauge showed more than expected to a 2.1 annual rate as of April. On a core basis, inflation also slightly undershot expectations. So there you have it. Not great news for the economy as a direct consequence of Trump's stupidity. Now, I will also say, I mentioned taco earlier, and for those who haven't been paying attention, they're like, what the hell do tacos have to do with it? Well, Trump was asked a question about a Wall Street taunt a couple of days ago that we did a video about. Just want to remind you of that moment because I think this has played a huge role in Trump lashing out the way that he has earlier today against China.
Mr. President, Wall Street analysts have coined a new term called the taco trade. They're saying Trump always chickens out on your tariff threats, and that's why markets are higher this week. What's your response to that?
I kick out?
Chicken out.
Oh, isn't that nice? Chicken out. I've never heard that. You mean because I reduced China from 145% that I set down to 100 and then down to another number? And I said you have to open up your whole country, and because I gave the European Union a 50% tax tariff, and they called up and they said, please, let's meet right now. Please, let's meet right now. And I said, okay, I'll give you till July 9. I actually asked them, I said, what's the date? Because they weren't willing to meet. And after I did what I did,
he's so flustered. And this part at the end,
they were doing no business whatsoever, and they were having a lot of problems. We were very nice to China. I don't know if they're going to be nice to us, but we were very nice to China. And in many ways, I think we really helped China tremendously because, they were having great difficulty because we were basically going cold turkey with China. We were doing no business because of the tariff, because it was so high. But I knew that. But don't ever say what you said. That's a nasty question. Go ahead.
She didn't say you're chickening out, dumbass. She said Wall Street is accusing you of chickening out, but he got so triggered by it. And again, just as a reminder, Wall Street mocks Trump with a 4-letter code to call bets against him. This again from a few days ago. Wall Street traders have developed a biting new acronym for a strategy that's become surprisingly lucrative for Trump's whiplash-inducing trade policy. TACO. Trump always chickens out. Reportedly first coined by the Financial Times columnist Robert Armstrong, the term has quickly gained traction among investors who are profiting from what they say is a predictable pattern. Trump threatens steep tariffs, the markets plunge, and days later he backs off in a way that prompts a rebound. So they're mocking him, and he doesn't like that whatsoever. Again, the reporter wasn't, I suppose, aggressively mocking him. She definitely embarrassed him by trying to get him to have a reaction to the question, which is hilarious. And she was also asked about this after that exchange, and I want to play that clip as well.
Kelly, he did not like this question, I can tell you, but he did go on to say that, especially when it comes to the EU and his backing off temporarily, at least, of that 50% tariff threat, he says the EU wouldn't be here today negotiating if it weren't for that. Now, when he makes a deal with them for something much more reasonable, people will say, oh, he was chicken. He says that's so unbelievable. So getting the president's take there on this question of whether he's bluffing too much and it's hard to take seriously now on the global stage on these tariff threats.
So Taco, Trump always chickens out. That's the phrase?
That's the phrase. It's not widely known yet, but you have seen it pick up in the press this week. It's why I wanted to ask him about it. Wall Street loves an acronym, as you know, Kelly. And the idea here is just, yes, the markets will go down when he makes a threat, only to rebound often even higher once the threat is back off the table. And so far, where we are in sort of this tariff limbo right now, many of, if not most, of the tariff threats that have been leveled so far are not yet in effect. That could be a different story 6 months from now. But the question now being, will other countries still take him seriously and come to the negotiating table if this sort of pattern continues?
Yeah. I hear he called that a nasty question, Megyn.
He sure did. A badge of honor, I guess.
Yeah. Well, Megyn, thanks very much for bringing it.
So you could tell they enjoy that. You see the smile, the shit-eating grin on her face, and she should. I mean, she got him good. She triggered him, and it's always fun to make Donald Trump triggered because he's a loser who deserves to be triggered in this way. One last clip talking about this particular taunt of Wall Street against Trump, which I think, again, is a huge motivating factor for the unhinged message we got from Trump against China earlier today.
Well, first, I was sort of knocked over that something that I'd said in my newsletter at the Financial Times to kind of just capture a little aspect of this moment made its way to the White House. But I think the president's response was very telling. The phrase hit a nerve with him because, of course, the facts support the Taco thesis, whether it's been on electronics early on or the high tariffs on China or the Liberation Day reciprocal tariffs, or most recently, the high tariffs on Europe. Trump talks big, blows his trumpet, makes a huge fuss, and before negotiations even begin, before he's even made contact with reality, he backs off. And correspondingly, the markets panic at first, then he backs off and markets bounce right up again. And it's just undeniable that this is part of the pattern of markets and this administration.
Yeah. So it does look like that's landed. And now as a consequence, I guess we're at further risk of a renewed trade war with China. Again, you never know with Donald Trump, but he's so thin-skinned. It seems like the natural conclusion that he's now just eager. He's horny to pick a fight with China because he wants to really show the people who call him a chicken. How dare you? We'll see what the consequences are, and whatever the consequences are, I guess the rest of us are going to have to live with them, all because this one petty small man is so weak and easily goaded. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.